Welcome everyone to the post-July 4th first work session. I hope everyone had a great holiday weekend. It seemed like an awful lot of happy people around town. Today is July 6th, and we are going to be having a discussion of the Theater in the Park project update. So we really don't have anything more to say. We'll have you take it away and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm Jed Bernstein, the producing director at Theater Aspen. Our goal today is to try to bring you folks up to date on where we are with planning, and also to respond to some specific questions that I think came from all of you collectively on various aspects of the lease. But at the end of the day, if there's sort of one thought that we'd like to leave you with, is that this project is not about building a bigger theater. It's about creating a year-round asset for the community, an asset that improves the experience for the audience, that expands our educational programming and educational opportunities, that supports other local arts organizations, and preserves our role as a valued and beloved member of Aspen's cultural identity. Or to put it succinctly, when this is done, it should be all the things you like about Theater Aspen, but better. It will not take up more ground space. It will, its programming purposes are the same. We're not looking to build restaurants and condos and things like that. We think it's going to be a real plus for the community. So we're going to take you through all those details. This little collage just shows you kind of a scope of some of our programming. I think many of you are certainly familiar with all the different aspects of it. Our education programming in the Aspen Public Schools, as well as other schools throughout the Valley. Our apprentice program, 33 people, young people every year. The community ticketing program, which gives away 400 to 500 free tickets every year to our main stage shows. The benefits that we do in working with the first responders. I think some of you were at the Guys, which Felicity Huffman and Bill Macy did a couple of years ago. That was a fundraiser for Axes and Arms. Our Story Time, which is free programming for kids 2 to 5. If you ever want to overdose on adorableness, come on Tuesdays at 10:30, 150 2 to 5-year-olds. Tomorrow, it's a book about dinosaurs, so if I can tempt you. And then, of course, we do a lot of collaborative programming. The next one up is Guys and Dolls, which we're doing at the Music Festival. That's 8 or 9 years old now, that series. On the next slide, we just list some of the quantifications of what I'm talking about. 18,000, over 18,000 patrons every year, both full-time Roaring Fork Valley and Aspen locals, as well as visitors. Over 1,200 students, local students, in 45 different education programs across 6 school districts. One of our mantras about theater education is that we want to provide not only opportunities for families in Aspen proper, but really up and down the valley. There are so many kids who don't have these advantages, and we are involved with different school districts, 5 other school districts, all up and down the valley. For that education program, over $60,000 in scholarships have been awarded so far this year. We live by the promise that no student has ever been turned away for their family's inability to pay. Talked about the free tickets in the community ticketing program, to the senior center, English in Action, the buddy program, and many more. Story Time we talked about, and about $7 million in annual local economic activity. This is not the number from the latest ACRA study. This is just taking our operating budget and adding the direct audience spend from our patrons during the summer. So that would be, I think, a low-end number. On the next slide, it's just really a summary of how we think a new project, this new project, is going to benefit this community, and we're going to go into this in a lot more detail. But it gives us a year-round performing arts facility, year-round educational offerings for locals and theater students. It fills a gap with 2 medium-sized spaces for performances with other community groups and functions. And this is an important thing because there are many venues in town. But this venue, which is estimated at 275 people, we're currently at 200, and with a second smaller space of 100, is really right-sized for many, many groups. The Wheeler is twice the size, District Theater is twice the size, and if you're a group that attracts an audience of 100 to 200, you can feel a little bit lost in a bigger space. And so this is actually providing something that actually, if the Wheeler project from years ago that was discussed about building the annex, if that had gone through, that would have been another way to solve that problem. But this, in fact, will solve it. And then, of course, it'll improve the stage technology to meet audience needs and what are now industry standards. That tent technically has not changed very much in the 20 years that we've been down there. I would be remiss to not show a slide for those of you who haven't toured around the facility what things are looking like down there. So on the next slide, it's just a little pastiche of sort of backstage and behind stage. This is not because we fail to be neatness freaks. This is because of the technology demands of putting on these shows and how we have to work that backstage area with everything from the portable dressing rooms to the porta potties to the technical storage areas. We're crammed in a very small space that begs to be improved. So that's kind of setting the stage, no pun intended, for why we're, trying to pursue this dream. And we want to spend a few minutes before we get to your specific questions, just talking about the overall design approach. And that's why I've asked Mike Albert from Design Workshop and Charles Cuniff, who's our architect, to just take you through a few pictures about what the design looks like, and then we'll get into some specific aspects of the lease. So, Michael.
Rachel, can I jump in with something?
Yeah, please. We have a question here.
Of course.
Thanks. Jed, you said that if the Wheeler Annex had been built, that would sort of solve the need for 100 to 200 seat
Well, it would have
room.
solved the need for those groups. It wouldn't have necessarily solved what we need in terms of technology, but for the groups that are attracting, let's call it 50 to 150 plus people, it would have been a problem solver for them.
Why wouldn't it solve your needs from a technology perspective?
Well, I suppose it would depend ultimately on what the technology was for the annex. The current Wheeler is not designed as a producing theater in the way we produce shows. It's a great presenting theater for the projects that come through, but it does not have the stage technology that we use in the full-size musicals that we produce from scratch.
Can you be more specific, please?
Yeah, I would say that dressing room facilities, backstage space, the dimensions of the stage itself. I think that I don't know all the intricacies of the Wheeler budget, but certainly when you're in rehearsal for multiple weeks and taking over the space, meaning that you can't present other things in there, it's not configured in that way. It's more, I'm sure Mike has talked to you about the difference between presenting and producing. Okay, presenting is booking projects that are produced that come to be presented at the Wheeler, and that's largely what the Wheeler does, not 100%, but largely. Producing is creating shows from scratch. They don't exist at all. They're not part of a tour. They're not going to other markets. They're being built here, literally, and performed here, and then they go away. So that requires a different approach in terms of the creation of the show than if a show comes in on trucks with their sets and simply puts them up, or if it's a concert, or, I mean, the Wheeler is doing so many amazing things now. I don't want to generalize, but it's not really configured as a producing house.
Is there a world, thank you for that. Is there a world where the lot that the annex was meant to go on could be suitable for Theater Aspen's needs?
In the work that was done, this is now, what, 4 years ago now, 5
I'm
years?
totally unfamiliar with those plans, so I know
Rachel, maybe
nothing
you
about them.
remember.
Yeah, they looked at whether kind of a black box, multi-use, smaller, could be put on that parkland next to the Wheeler. I won't remember it exactly, but it seemed that there was an awful lot of utilities and things like that in the alley, and where do they move them? Where would they continue to park? Would they do park there now? But then I think the bigger question was, how does it fit into the scheme of other art and performing facilities in town? I don't know if you remember more from that study.
I was on the Wheeler board at the time that we
Okay.
did the feasibility study. And at that time, the board made the decision along with staff not to pursue it because the study showed that there wasn't really the demand or need for it in the community. So I would recommend maybe trying to find that from the city and seeing it might be a good reference point for you.
Great.
Am I
And
right?
You don't have to answer this off the cuff, Jed, so I'd say maybe after tonight, you guys pull up the records on that. And I know it's a complicated answer, but
Right.
is there a world in which Theater Aspen could fit better there than in the park?
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, we will come back with that. Christine, remind me, I don't think, it was a feasibility study, but I'm not sure there were ever real designs, right, for,
I think it was kind of sketch plan design. I mean, it was enough that it was segmented
could
by
see,
floor and, yeah.
so.
Conceptual, we worked on a version of the conceptual plans.
Yeah.
All right, Michael.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Mike Albert, principal at Design Workshop. And we're honored to have recently joined Charles Cuniff and the team and Theater Aspen on this project. Our role kind of coming in recently has been to step back, look at the site holistically, listen to the goals of the Theater Aspen, CCA, the city, and really envision this not only as a home to Theater Aspen, but also as one of Aspen's most treasured public spaces and landscapes. How can this investment kind of lift all boats on there? So the slide that you have in front of you today, from a landscape architect's perspective, this is truly one of Aspen's jewels. The Roaring Fork, the John Denver Sanctuary, the stream courses, mature trees, mountain views, all of those kind of rivals anywhere else in town. But on the right-hand side, working closely with parks, we've identified opportunities to strengthen the public experience, improving accessibility and connectivity, screening service areas, resolving drainage issues, and elevating the overall landscape quality. And certainly many of these improvements could have been done separately outside of this project, but this investment, again, gives the opportunity to make the park even stronger. Next slide. So that has us thinking about the design idea that has guided kind of the direction to date, and that is Aspen's theater in the park. And rather than thinking about this as a building in the park, we've really tried to explore how the landscape itself could be part of the theater experience. And so what you see here is an elevation cut along the building, where we've looked to the Aspen native ecologies, Aspen woodlands, the riparian edge that faces on the northern side, and even kind of the roof terrace being an alpine meadow of wildflowers and meadow to really link together architecture and landscape. This, hopefully, for someone that has never been here before, doesn't look like a building or a park, but it really comes together holistically on there. The following page, that brings us to the plan. And again, working very closely with Theater Aspen, CCA, and the Parks Department, our focus has really been to strengthen the relationship between the theater and the park itself. And the building, as you see here, is positioned in a similar location to the limit of disturbance from today's operations. And many of the key elements that we'll talk about are in similar locations. So starting at the bottom of the page, the two orange squares to just familiarize yourself, those are the restrooms. The park is off on the lower left-hand side. But coming across the bridge, as you do today, into a new public plaza, creating a welcoming front door, integrating trees, creating shade, creating that spill out area for theater goers on there. Further, if you continue on, the plan looks at an accessible path to the John Denver Sanctuary, which does not exist today, as well as a stairway up to the roof area of the building. But that northern side, there are a number of white lines that's envisioned to have the grade heel in the building so that when you're walking along the river, the building really grows out of the landscape. On the left side of the image, there is a new boardwalk that parallels the building, hugs the building, and provides access, but a second means of connectivity. And then in the upper left-hand corner, the integration of fire truck turnaround, back of house area, and how all of those with the pathways have been thought through so that people along the park pathways do not look into the back of house areas, and those are just strategically oriented to achieve that. So with that, that's an overall of the site plan, and I'll hand it over to Charles to speak about the building further.
Hi, Charles Cuniff with CCA. As Mike mentioned, the building footprint, the existing building footprint you can see here is the tent, the lobby, and then all the trailers that have to house the actors. There are minimum standards for union for actors, so we can't ignore that. That's part of their requirements. And then some of the back of house storage and material supply. The general circulation on the property would remain the same. Its relationship to the John Denver Sanctuary the same. And some of you may remember when we came here before that the original plan was to have the building completely buried, completely under a mound, and rightfully so, Parks felt that was a little too artificial in feeling that it was too much of a change of the park, and that they would prefer to see some of the building emerging from the park. So our current plans are integrated with the park, but in a way where some of it's subterranean and some of it's above grade. And we can go to the plans. The entrance you see on the left is existing, and on the right is the proposed. So the mass and scale is not different from what you see today. In fact, it's a softer building than what you see today. Next slide. The view across the water to what you see now is the white tent, and then what you would see is the building, which would be concrete and stone. Next slide.
What is the
Oh,
height
sorry.
of the building that you have there?
It's approximately what we have now. We're trying to keep it approximately with what we have now at the ridge point of the tent.
Yeah, but it's much
It's broader.
broader than the ridge
Yes.
point of the tent.
And part of that is to make the roof of it, where now the tent takes up the footprint of the park that you can't use. This would return the park to the roof of the theater. So it's like a lifted meadow. The roof of the theater would be a usable park for the public.
But what is the height from the ground to the top of that?
I don't remember offhand, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the 18-foot neighborhood, but 18 or 20 feet.
To the meadow, but not to the top of the fly tower.
Right, exactly, yes. In this image.
How does the fly tower compare to the current structure?
The fly tower, I don't have those in my head. The fly tower is, or according to, compared to the existing structure, it's considerably taller. It's probably 20 feet taller than the existing building.
Than the ridge of the existing building?
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
and hopefully, the intent is to limit it to just the extent of the fly tower, and have the fly tower also be clothed in sort of rusted metal, like the pump house building and the roof of the Rio Grande restrooms, so that it would look like a sculpture in the park. Rather than a building, it would be a Richard Serra type sculpture. So it would seem like it would be a sculpture in the park rather than a building in the park. That's the inspiration for it. Next. The view from John Denver Sanctuary, and on the left is existing, on the right is the proposed. You can just see some of the roof of the building and a bit of the fly tower in that, next to that tree on the far right. And next slide.
And that's if you're down low in that kind of area.
Theater.
Of the amphitheater, it's not as if you're kind of
Not
on
standing
the
on
crust
top,
of it.
top of the
Yeah,
mound, right, yeah.
Thank you.
And the hope is that the intention is that the building itself would enhance the experience there because you'd be able to get up to a more prominent point and see the views, enjoy the views where you don't. Right now, the tent takes up one of the prime spots up of the park. So on the left is the lower level where we have the rehearsal hall. And then on the right is the underground level where the theater stage is, and the upper level of the rehearsal hall, and the green rooms for the dressing rooms for the actors, and a loading dock on the left, the lower level of it. The next plan is the ground level, and you'd see the ground level, the back half of that is actually mounded over or covered over with green roof. And the idea is that this integrates well enough with the park that it's more seamless, and that you can, while you arrive at the front entrance, and it's an obvious entrance like it is today, as you go around the building merges with the landscape, so you don't see sides of a building as you go around. Hopefully it's more welcoming and more appropriate for a facility that houses a significant arts organization. And the white area would be the fly tower area as proposed.
And you don't have a view by chance of it from Mill Street looking towards the fly tower?
Not at this point, but we will have. I mean, that would be, as we get into the process, the review process, we'll have more than enough renderings, and also my intention is to have a full model.
Yeah, it would be of concern what the views are to the river and to the park from Mill Street, and particularly what would the lighting in the evenings be when it's in use or not in use, because that's, I've lived in that area for a long time, and you just think of looking down the river at the snow and the quiet that's there in the winter time.
You would see less than you do today, because you wouldn't have a white tent, and you wouldn't have the polycarbonate lobby area, all of which glows at night. This would be all it would feel like it's all underground except for the entrance. And when the lobby has a significant overhang, so there's no light going up. It's dark sky compliant. And then from Mill Street, we have looked at initial studies, and when you're coming from Mill Street and across that path to the bridge, it would be there'd be a fence that blocks the loading area, but it would all be blended in with landscape. So you would actually see a lot less than you see today. The goal is that this would be an improvement rather than something more. It would actually come across as something less.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next. One of the questions I know that you all have asked is, well, have you considered other design solutions? That's an obvious and logical question. And in order to answer that, I think we want to just lay out what our criteria were in beginning this project at the outset. Being able to consolidate all of our activities in one place. We are now spread out really throughout the valley, but let's not consider the things that we do in Parachute and Carbondale, but really all around town, because we are so constrained. Rehearsal space, places for our education classes, certainly all of our activities between September and May cannot be done down there. Solving the bathroom challenge, the biggest fundraising lever I have is if I say to people, if this gets done, we'll have regular bathrooms, and that makes everybody very happy. We think it will reduce the community, or our goal was to reduce community environmental impact, and we're going to go into that in some detail in a couple of slides. Producing opportunities for use by other nonprofits, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Proper temperature and ventilation. I'm sure you have heard, we hear complaints about it being, too hot at matinees, too cold sometimes at night in August and September. But it's really come to the fore in the last couple of weeks with the smoke presence around town, that for not only the performers, but for audiences that are so aware of what's going on in the atmosphere, that trying to insulate ourselves literally from that. Year-round use, we've expanded our program now in the last 8 years so that we do, much like the music festival, have a presence in the so-called off-season and the shoulder seasons. So we would want to have a space that we could use year-round. Of course, expanding the number of community members served, and lastly, trying to always look for higher and better production and tech values. So if you take that as the sort of the brief, then if we go to the next slide, well, what are the things we could do? Well, what about other locations? Well, to begin with, we think we're in the prettiest place possibly in the world, along with the Delacorte Theater in Central Park, this current space. And as all of you know, the sanctuary and the theater were kind of developed and evolved together and were planned together. But even beyond that, if you look at the economics, if we had to purchase space and then build from scratch, it would become unaffordable and untouchable. Because it's a tent, you can't renovate. You have to take it down if you're going to really achieve anything, because it's a very, when I say flimsy, I don't mean it's going to fall down on the audience, but you understand what I mean. It's not a structure that can be redesigned from at minimum from the inside. In terms of our current programming, and I'm not even talking about the months of the year, we are using every inch of space. So if we were to go somewhere else, we would need more space for sure. And then, and this is partly to your question, Bill, about, well, why can't we just go to other venues? Well, if we add up the number of days that we think we are currently active, either with a main stage show or education things, we're over 200. So when you think about the Wheeler, you think about the district, you think about Pepke, you think about all the other logical places, they don't have that kind of capacity. And I mean, after all, the district theater is built for the students, and as it should be. And it would be, fun, I'm sure, to have a professional theater on that campus, but not if it shut the kids out of being able to do, what they wanted to do. So none of those things seemed super practical. But as the next slide outlines, there is some good news here, which is that we are well aware of the concerns about mass, and we are well aware of the concerns about, I say to you, it's going to be just like it was, only better, but if there's this giant thing sitting in the middle of the park, then that's not just as good as it was. So there are 4 areas in particular that we are looking at very closely, and you'll see the results of this when we submit our application. One is the fly tower. So let's explain the fly tower. The concept of the fly tower is that if you have a place to lift scenery into the air so that it disappears, it gives you more flexibility in how you stage these shows. In order to do that, you need a certain amount of clearance over the top of the stage so that the scenery's out of sight, and of course there's safety things and whatever. So it's a definite design plus from that point of view. On the other hand, as you guys have talked about, it's a thing that you can't not see. So we're trying to explore what if. What are the other solutions? What can you do with the scenery if you're not going to raise it in the air? How can you still achieve some improvement in quality without having to do that? The excavation levels, you guys all know, the real cost is in the digging. And if we can dig less, not only is it a safer, more conservative approach, but it's going to be cheaper. So how can we make better use of the space at grade without expanding it, because we don't want to fall into that trap of taking up more park. That would be self-defeating. But still dig less, and we're looking at programmatic design changes there. And then we get to the roof, and there are 2 parts of the roof, or 2 things to consider. One is the public accessibility, and that's a wonderful amenity, but it also leads to certain design decisions and choices and construction things to accommodate that. So how much of that is necessary? Do we need that? Must we have that? Must you guys have that? Do you feel that that's critical, or, So we need to explore that. And then the maintenance implications, because if we're going to take the lead in maintaining whatever's up there, it's got to be affordable, of course, but it's got to be safe, and it's got to be all sorts of things. So how do we reimagine that, or is it reimaginable, to help us in terms of shrinking mass? So I think that in the next 8 to 12 weeks, which is our timetable for submitting a land use application, is going to go through all that and I think come to you with something that's going to look evolutionary and maybe even revolutionary, but certainly evolutionary from what you have most recently seen. Okay, let's get to some of your other specific questions about the lease, unless there's anything about that last point.
Anyone, I think
No?
just carry on. And
So far, so good? Yeah, we'll come back. Okay. So Part A, the lease term, why so long? As Kate knows, and going back even before Kate, length of lease was always going to be an issue because we're raising a ton of private money, and donors need that certainty. Is 80 or 90 years the magic number? Of course not. Is 10 years the magic number? Of course not. So we need to come to a place that provides enough certainty that justifies that kind of investment, but that is also comfortable from the public point of view, that you can't, do something that is, from a legal perspective, tantamount to a sale, but also something that becomes a degree of permanence that is anxiety creating. So I think the signal to this answer is, let's talk about it and let's figure out a place that is comfortable for everybody. I know there was a question about the leasehold mortgage, and so I wanted to supply some backstory to that. Our plan is that we will have 100% of the money in legally enforceable pledges before we put a shovel in the ground. We're only looking to finance some portion of that, which will be represented by the cash. People will make their pledges over 3 to 5 years, so not all 100% of the cash will be in the bank, but to finance that difference. Any financing we do would be based on the leasehold, not on the city's ownership interest. So we're going to have to find financing that responds to that. And our estimate of retiring that debt is 5 years after we open, because if people are going to do 3 to 5 years, it's going to take, we're going to address this in a minute, 2 to 3 years to build. Then you see how the math works. So that's the intention there.
Can I reply to that one,
Yeah.
Rachel? I want to prevent you from going down a path that isn't going to be fruitful, Jed. And I'm going to speak on behalf of all 5 of us, but if anyone disagrees with what I'm saying, please feel free to correct me. This position only comes from the place that this is on city land. Obviously, we wouldn't even be discussing this at all if it was not the case. But because it's on city land, I think we have to be extra precautionary and thoughtful about the community's interests. In our discussions about financing, the basic conclusion that I recall was we have zero interest in financing of any kind on city land.
Say the last.
We have zero interest of financing of any kind on city land. So I just don't want you to continue pursuing that notion. As we talked about it and thought about it, it became very uncomfortable for us about the what-ifs and the concerns that it brought up.
You
So
elaborate, if 100% of the money is identified, and if no city asset is being pledged, and if you have guarantees that you're not going to be left with a hole in the ground, what concerns are
my concerns are identified money is different than possessed money, number one. It's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
It's a surety, but it's not a guarantee. And you're not going to sue one of your donors if they don't pony up. I just don't see it happening. I think it introduces a third party that's not tied to the community in any way, shape, or form, that needs to pursue their best interests in of their financial interests, which is totally reasonable, but it's not in our community's best interest necessarily, if there was some kind of default scenario. I don't think that's a smart thing for us to support. I think that I could go, there's a lot of what-ifs here that were exactly what I'm trying to convey here. Is those were the things that were making us concerned and me concerned.
Yeah. And thank you for kind of elaborating on that. I don't know that it's something that gets addressed here at this meeting. There's more to cover, but I appreciate that. And I also was going to bring up something on the leasehold. Just having reviewed the letter of intent that a past council presented and signed, I'm just thinking, say, for example, it's the Lumberyard Housing Project, where we're partners with them on this project. And at the end of, was it 40 years or longer with the bond, that we will then own the buildings. And even though it's built on city property, and we're putting a lot of money in, they're putting a lot of money in. And I was thinking of the old Tasters building, which was a privately fundraised effort for a youth center back in the day. And that was set up with a contract with the city because it was on city land, that at the end of a certain time period, there was a decreasing value. And should the Tasters restaurant close or the youth center close that was there, the city would be able to buy it back for X amount. And it kept diminishing down. And so I just was unclear from reading the letter of intent of what the intention was with the end of the leasehold or the end of the ownership, whether it became a city asset or it did not become a city asset. So I just have that question to put out there as well. But again, in our historical examples, the city does not give away city land and then have permanent facilities built on it forever without some, that ownership becoming part of the city. So that's just been the tradition. But anyhow, we'll keep moving on with the issues if you'd
Yes.
like. And
Of course.
we've heard the concern raised.
Absolutely. Okay, number C has to do with special events. And so this is a revision or a clarification, I think, of what you saw in your lease, which is to, the lease proposal suggested 24 events. And where that came from, by the way, is that we now have 8 that are allowed in our lease for 3 to 4 months a year. So we multiplied, and that's how we got to 24. But the thought here is that we would further clarify this, that this would be divided into 2 categories between events or uses by nonprofits, other arts organizations, or other nonprofits, and for-profit events, and that there would be 2 different rate structures, obviously with an incentive or a discounted rate for the nonprofit.
That is the internet,
Shifting over to the guest.
not your fault.
I can describe the next slide, actually, because it's rather simple. It speaks to the length of construction. Obviously, we haven't finalized our designs, but the best guess we have is 20 to 24 months. And if everything were to work, perfectly, the idea would be to begin the construction in the fall at the end of a season, whatever year that would be, in September, and then be able to be out of the space one summer, but then be back the following summer, if you follow what I mean. So we obviously have a shared interest in minimal disruption, minimally disrupting the park, but also the longer it takes, the more expensive, the harder it is. We got to be somewhere else, and we have to want to stay visible somewhere else. So it is in both of our interests to do this as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. Now I'm going to need a slide.
Yeah.
Or I could sing from chorus line.
So grassroots does seem to be broadcasting yet, but we are not at this time.
Okay.
We can give it a few minutes if you
Do you
want.
mind if we take a 5 minute?
I don't mind if it's okay for you guys.
You never know. Miracles happen. Okay, thank you. We are on 5-minute break with grassroots. Welcome back to the City of Aspen work session on Theater in the Park. Pardon us, we had a brief interruption with lack of internet, but we're proceeding now. So please, Jed, take it away.
Thank you so much. During the introduction, we have actually built the new theater, and please come down and visit. Fantastic.
It's fast.
Okay, let's skip ahead to E, rather. We talked about D. So I know there was some questions about sort of the financing of the construction aside, the financial viability of this as an ongoing operation. And so we just wanted to give you some, high-level financial facts about the theater. Our operating budget at the moment is about $6 million annually. It's tripled in the last 8 years. Our cash balance has tripled in the last 24 months. We've had a very successful last 2 or 3 years. Our current reserve is over $2.1 million. And last year, our last year of operations had an operating surplus of over $500,000. I think the most important piece of this is that you'll hear us refer publicly to to our capital campaign, and that built into that is a substantial endowment, operating endowment for this new project specifically. So when we get the construction costs identified, we'll be able to share with you, what does that mean? Okay, substantial. But the point being that before we put a shovel in the ground, our board will require us to have identified all this money, and that the capital campaign will have raised enough to help backstop us. So that's kind of the backdrop. But look, it's undeniable that more activity, of course, leads to more costs. I mean, why have a building you can operate year-round if you're not going to do anything with it? But it also creates more revenue because you're selling tickets to things and you're raising money for new programs. But there are some specific operating budget implications that are all points in a favorable direction in terms of future operations. So certainly the endowment that I referred to increases the available yearly resources. Consolidating all our activities in one permanent building reduces expense because we don't have to rent other spaces, et cetera. Doing the same with our education program activities. We spend well over $40,000 a year on renting education spaces, just in Aspen, not to mention outside. We spend money on renting rehearsal spaces, which we will have as part of this. Supplemental equipment rentals, because we don't have technology that can be built into the tent, we have to bring in forklifts and things like that, trailers for dressing rooms, et cetera, those go down. Those are the site-specific equipment rentals, and also office space for production staff down there. But that's things that help us. But there are also operating implications on the next slide that help the community. There are environmental impacts, reduced vehicle trips between all these different places, intra-city transportation costs between work sites gets eliminated, significant off-site storage reduction, sanitation, which is piecemeal now because of the nature of the different kinds of refuse that we have to get rid of. We will have more storage space built in, more permanent dumpster capacity, and we won't have those porta potties, et cetera. So environmental impacts improved. But on the next slide, overall community impacts. We talked about the restrooms and more educational opportunities, the interest by other nonprofits to use the space. We are fairly far along in conversations with Dance Aspen. They're looking for a home or a regular home, and they're wonderful collaborators. We are collaborating with them on Guys and Dolls next week and love working with them. We have talked to the other groups as well. We love collaborating in general, so we would expect to be able to come to you with a waiting list already of groups that are interested in collaborating or using this space. We think this will provide a better and safer experience. It certainly will increase accessibility for physical challenged both workers and audience members. Temperature, those matinees, it's pretty hot in there. And I wouldn't say dangerously in a health sense, but it's very uncomfortable. Ventilation we touched on. Sound is an interesting issue. We do not get sound complaints from the neighbors, but there is certainly sound leakage. There's no doubt about that. That goes away 100% in this scenario. Supporting local economic activity in the shoulder seasons. This, we think, is going to become a more salient issue. We have been following with some interest the reports from SKICO about winter season prospects, et cetera, et cetera. Arts are not weather dependent. And, but the economic activity in the shoulder seasons, we think, is an important aspect of this. And then improved production values, but yes, the community will enjoy that. It's important to us as artists, but we think the community will enjoy that as well. On the next slide, we just wanted to touch on the topic of the public vote. We understand that a public vote is not required, but if needed, we would strongly recommend that that happen after the land use review, because at that time there would have been a detailed plan that was vetted and pushed through the review process, so that our goal would be a fully informed public that understands what they're voting on, either up or down. We think this will be a popular project, so we don't love the idea of the, spending the extra money and the time that it would take, but we certainly understand that that might be the path. But we think that the timing for this, the right timing for this, is after we get through land use. I think in conclusion, I would just leave you with 3 or 4 thoughts. We think that this project is consistent with the longstanding goals of the park. Those who go back to the art park know that this was what was always thought about then, that the arts and the landscaping and the design and the development of that area, the sanctuary, et cetera, go together. We think there are a lot of public benefits. This is not just about we're precious artists who want to do big shows and why can't we have a nice space. We think that the uses are consistent with how the space is being used now. More time, of course, but in terms of the type of spaces or type of uses. And that's been true for the last 3 decades. And we're eager to continue to work collaboratively with parks and with all the other city departments and with, of course, all of you to be sensitive in how this evolves to make this reality. Because I think that as Tori said in one of our previous discussions, if you could just plop the thing down and it was all done, you'd say, oh, well, that's great, But, of course, you can't. There's a lot of stuff between here and there. And we're dedicated and serious about figuring out how to get from the here to the there, because we think when we get there, it's going to be pretty great for everybody. So with that, we're anxious to answer other questions or hear discussion or whatever you'd like.
Thank you for that. Let's see who would like to start with any questions.
I don't really have any questions. I've seen the presentations on this for years now, so I'm well versed on what's being asked, and I do have some comments, but I'll hold off on questions.
Okay. Well, let me maybe start. You mentioned the art park. Actually, I had helped there my very first years here in town with a in-town condo over at Hunter Creek. I think it was 1988, and started that. And I had seen, and I've mentioned this to others in your circles, that the early plans that Harry Teague had designed to have a kind of permanent theater spot there. And it was definitely more modest than what we're seeing now. And I do think size and particularly perhaps the height of the fly tower might be the most problematic, but the overall mass, is it just too much? Are we trying to bring too much into a really constrained and special place that people have a lot of feelings for it? And so, you had mentioned the 100-seat medium facility type place, as well as the main theater, the question really becomes, do you need all of that to go forward? Could this be reduced in its size and its cost by just focusing on one theater or the other type of size issue? Would be something that I would put forward. I think there has been some testing from the parks, but I'm not sure. I really worry about the water and the river. And I have seen years, hard to believe this year, but I've seen years when Twin Lakes was not allowed to take any more water. They had taken their full allotment, and they had to keep sending it down this way. And I've seen North Star fully flooded and people canoeing out there. And the trail along the Roaring Fork collapsed into the river right underneath where the recycling center is. And just taking that walk one morning is, oh, trail's gone. And so that river can be very, very destructive as a force. And I worry about that in that area. We haven't seen it, but there was just a couple winters ago, Steamboat got 6 feet of snow in 24 hours. So, it really, we could have flooding at a level we haven't seen in a long time. And that's actually where the little, quote, kayak course came from, was to be able to divert the water away from the art museum. The art museum on that side, there used to be some Chevrolet bodies put into the side of the bank to try to prevent flooding back in the old days. So I am, whatever sort of geotechnical or hazard concern study, I'd imagine that's going to be needed at the point at which there is a real deep review. I also think about and wonder a little about conflict with other activities that use the park itself. So would it be problematic for Palm Beach Festival or Palm Tree Festival to be there again when the theater is operating, or a big rugby tournament, or the Motherlode volleyball? I mean, at what point is the noise from the park disruptive to theater performances and type of things? And would there be a future that it's not this council, it's a future council is having to juggle these scheduling concerns of, oh, well, you've always used the park for this, but now the theater has that. And, at what level of conflict would really exist? We have so many park users, and then people coming up with new activities that we can't really fully imagine here. So those are issues for me. And I do think maybe a new concern thrown into the basket here that hasn't been spoken before. But I think that when you become a year-round facility like this, you really start talking about what are the affordable housing needs for the workforce of that facility. And this year we've went through some very lengthy hearings about the Meadows squeezing a little more housing onto their site. They were given the grant of, oh, you don't need housing as a community benefit, but now they're all desperately needing housing. And they're telling us if it weren't for the J1 workers, we would collapse. And if we weren't recruiting people from Glenwood Springs and Rifle and Silt, how would our town function? And so, for me, I am not one who wants to say anything should be exempt with housing in the future. And when you get into year-round staff and part year, I don't even know how you calculate such things. It's obviously a nonprofit. It's different from a commercial business. But just we're a performing arts nonprofit, so therefore someone else takes the burden on housing. We just can't deal with that anymore. And I know I'm talking about the employees you'll need in the future, the summer competition for employees and housing and seasonal housing. Sitting in with the business community, it's really hard to tell them that anyone should be exempt from building new housing or having a housing associated with a project that is going to have this sort of economic and magnitude impact. So I just have to put that out there, that is absolutely a concern of mine for this or for other projects going forward, frankly. So I hopefully broke the ice with those comments and see if anybody else has questions or comments. John?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's pretty obvious. The fact that the city owns the land makes this land use application much different than a normal land use application. And it creates a bunch of issues that aren't normally present before us. I also understand the advantages that Theater Aspen is seeking and that it would receive and why you're asking for it. It makes sense to consolidate your operations and all that. That's perfectly understandable. I spent a lot of time over in the park this weekend with the race going on and the carnival and eating at 520 Grill, and I was thinking a lot about the theater and the possibility of it, and the fact that all the construction traffic will be coming in on that narrow pathway, I think is really problematic. And for a year and a half, that's going to be a huge construction impact in the middle of one of our most beloved and used parks in the whole city. I just think we all should be thinking about this very carefully moving forward. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. Christine, you have comments?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and being here. It's a big project and a lot to think about. Just a couple questions, and you don't have to answer them now, but to think about. Consolidating into one location puts offices, potentially summer camp.
Not offices.
Okay, your offices will stay, but
At
camps
Redbird.
will move down there. That's a different use than theater productions, so thinking about access for, I have young kids and we drop them off right in front of camps. Walking into a park, some of those accessibility questions I'd like thought about in terms of increased programming there. On the topic of increased programming, staff increases, and Rachel mentioned this, but how is housing being thought about and how is increased staffing being addressed? And then finally, how frequently will other organizations actually be able to use this facility? You mentioned 200 active days already with your own organization, so that limits already what sort of asset this is to the community in terms of use. So I'd like more details on that. And then just a final comment. I don't undervalue the importance of your organization, but I want to see the need for this demonstrated to the community. This is not private land, it's a public space, and I think the public should weigh in on this. It's a generational project. It's a potential asset. It's also a potential liability for the city, depending on the success of your organization. And so I'd like to see this go to a public vote, either advisory or land use. I think we have to talk about that, but I really do want the community to weigh in this. I think the only precedence we have for this is the ski museum, and the community did vote on that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Sam,
Yeah.
Bill?
Thank you for being here. I'm a big fan of Theater Aspen, and I guess I did think of questions, even though I just had comments as far as what your timeline is. This was brought up again recently, and hence the work session. And I was like, I think I remember hearing about this when I was on P&Z. And then we did a site visit as a previous council, and then we have another council election this March and a new council next April. So I'm kind of curious on when you're hoping to, if you get a green light, and to even start the land use review process, so you can even get to that potential public vote.
Well, the hope is to submit in fall and.
This fall.
This fall?
Yeah.
And our advisors have said, roughly speaking, 6 months before it would come back to you, working through the process with all the various departments. So that would be spring back here, multiple readings presumably. So, and is the election going to move from spring to fall? And who knows? But at least that's the next phase. We would hope within the year to be ready for that public vote, or to have gotten past it, or, depending on how.
I say that to you because, at least for me, who's been involved with P&Z and then council, that it was hard to remember a lot of these details. One of them that I want to cop to is I don't remember the fly tower being so tall, and it sounds like you did make some design changes, like you were going to dig a lot deeper. And again, if you keep making these changes for the better, that's great, but it makes it more difficult for council and others to keep track of it in a way that's productive for both of us, especially as you head towards trying to get council approval on this. I take comfort in being supportive of having a public vote on it, but I do think it's obviously our due diligence as a council to get it to a point where we would at least like it in theory and not just put it to a public vote, not liking the design and looking out for the community, for the public resources, the public park in the future, all the details that matter. So I say that very clearly. I think for me, the biggest, and I fear for you guys that people will not think this is as critical as the other projects going on, and thus not want to support it because there's just too much happening. So something to consider there.
The timing.
Some of the other ones, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, I just want to go back to the fly tower, just like the height there, the design. I think some of the renderings you brought forward today are not, say it politely, are not deceiving, but not the full
Picture.
and thus harder to discuss in like detail about being supportive of it. I kind of do wish that you could use the same footprint and do something that was much less impactful, but I understand where you're coming from as far as wanting to donate to a major improvement. I guess the last thing I would say is if you could just snap your fingers and it'd be done, I do think it looks like it would be a great project. I just think there are a lot of hurdles to get the land use approval from this council and then ultimately the support from a public vote that you're going to have to contend with. I do encourage you to bring this forward though, so instead of having a work session every other year, and it sounds like you're not going to, we can actually discuss it in like fine detail and really hone in on the issues, because I think, again, all this stuff has been said and it'll be said again unless you actually put in an application and we can really finalize this and put it towards a public vote.
We are anxious to resolve this. I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah.
So.
Bill, do you have?
Yes, thanks. I echo a lot of what was, almost everything that was said already, so I'll try not to be redundant. I definitely encourage you to explore this Wheeler Annex concept. If the reason that project wasn't advanced was because the broader community couldn't identify the demand, but you obviously see the demand, and that was the only sort of hindering factor of bringing things forward, then maybe this is a win-win, and maybe there's a joint venture there with the city that alleviates some of the concerns that you're hearing. So I'd say please pursue that somewhat. That aside, I'm generally supportive of this project. I think my concerns remain the height of the fly tower and sort of the overall visual impact, ongoing visual impact of this structure. Christine alluded to this, but the potential liability to the city. Our world is changing quickly, and consumer preferences are evolving very rapidly and in ways that no one expected. I certainly couldn't have predicted that movie theaters would be in the dire straits that they're in today, and God forbid that happens to live theater, but it's not off the table. The next generation could have no interest in that, and then what happens? I don't know how you answer that question for us, but I do want to put that out there, that to me is a real risk, and what's the next use of this structure? Who's responsible for this structure? How do we get some comfort that Theater Aspen can weather some storms, financial or demand-wise or otherwise? Those are real concerns for me, and to fully get behind this, I'd want some comfort on some of those issues, even though they may be theoretical and hopefully are. I do feel strongly about the financing thing that I mentioned earlier, and one point that I neglected to mention, and someone will bring up eventually, I think, if I anticipate they will, is like, why did you allow financing on the lumberyard then? And I think the difference is one, there's a dedicated funding stream for that purpose, and we, the city, are contributing the majority of the equity for that project through that funding stream. Also, if this developer is unsuccessful, I think the demand remains, and there's other people that could step in to fill it in. I don't think that's true with Theater Aspen. You guys are the theater organization here. There isn't a second in line without reinventing the wheel. So I think that there's some key differences there that I wanted to highlight. I think those are the majority of my points. I'd like to see this continue. I do think that this could be wonderful for the community, but I wanted to share all my thoughts on it.
Good. Thank you. Let me come back around with a few kind of comments. Following yours towards the end there, I would say, I want to make it clear, I really enjoy theater. I enjoy theater in the park. I enjoy Theater Aspen. When I was raising my son, I took him down multiple times to Temple Buell to be able to catch real performances of, Phantom of the Opera and Evita and other great plays. So this is I really do enjoy theater, and I'm glad to see the effort and the work and the dreams and ambitions that your board has and is coming forward with. I think we're here perhaps as a buffer to try to make sure it becomes a project that will garner that public vote. I do think that the public vote is necessary, absolutely. And, if we weren't putting it to a public vote, someone would do it by initiative. That's just the way ordinances go around here. And so speaking in terms of the public vote, I think Charles has already mentioned, as we get final design, we'll probably have a model that people can look at. I think that's important. I think it's important that you really have views from all sides and views without the trees so that people really get a sense of that building. I think that if we were getting too close to a public vote, we would require story poles in the corners of the building and then the greatest height so that the public really can understand what they would be voting on. And to me, this is all about seeking clarity, greater clarity with the story poles and the multiple views for the public to be able to have when looking at it. There needs to be a little more clarity, and there may be stuff that people who saw this presentation with Tori are more familiar with, but the nonprofit uses would be limited to the patio area and the tent itself. It's not as if the larger Rio Grande closes for.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah, I think you need to make that very clear to the public, though, who are considering supporting the project or not. Similar to others, the height of the fly is of concern. And it's just kind of trying to think, how do you make it enough to do what you'd like to do in the future, but not too much that is overkill or extra expense, or enough that, I was here when the Caps Auto Performing Arts Center got defeated with the simple bumper sticker, more parts, less arts. And, it's easy enough for community sentiment to go against you when there's a perception of, well, will I really be able to go there? Or, what does it cost me? And change is, for some people, change is often loss. I'm loss of what it used to look like. I've just lost what I used to walk by. I lost the use of the park for 1.5 years during construction or more, and making sure that the benefits and the perceived benefits outweigh what people may see as loss is just critically important. And like others have said, I do think it would be important to find a way to begin to address housing issues to go along with that. But that's all I can really come up with. Again, I do think it's exciting. I can't blame dreamers for dreaming big on something like this. It's just important to make sure it is sized right for being in a park next to a river. It's not Broadway. It's not Colfax. It's not downtown Temple Buell area. So we have to create grandeur without grandiosity, if we can.
thank you all for being willing to engage, and believe me, we are anxious to find the way through that, Rachel, as you say, is the right balance between the dreams come true, but in an appropriate way for where it is and who it's serving. And we pledge to do that. And as I said, to pursue with all deliberate speed, because if it's going to happen, it needs to happen. And
That's right.
And we got to figure it out. So.
Sam?
Yeah, please come back in the fall with a formal application.
Absolutely.
And not the end-all be-all, please continue to have Annie Denver's blessing on this. I think that means a lot in the John Denver Sanctuary.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. We appreciate your time and
Thanks.
everyone who's taken the time to attend.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Pete, did you have anything else for us today?
Today, council.
Okay, that sounds good. Very good, guys. We are adjourned. Thank you, Grassroots TV. We appreciate your time.